we have 10 topics to cover. Sure. So
All right. Welcome back, everyone.
We'll always be the same person starting it. So
For our next session here, we're going to be have the guys from Gale Force Winds, who you've probably seen. They've been doing the interviews at the off to the side of the room here all day.
Oh, we got a little microphones.
A little bit of background about Gale Force is that they're Navy veterans and lifelong friends, Jerry Carew and Alan Dale. And they come from a strong, the name Gale Force Winds, not winds, it's winds, comes from the strong and persistent winds that can feel very tumultuous. But when you come out of the other side, after going through them, it's smooth sailing. I think that's kind of a lot of the history of Newfoundland. Perfect metaphor for a brand born during a global pandemic where the only goal was to start and create podcasts that featured positive and uplifting conversations with business leaders and change makers to inspire. Joining them on the panel today is Natasha Hudson. She's the board chair for the Community Sector Council. Before that, she was with BDC, and she had a long, illustrious career in technology before that. Welcome, Natasha. Mike Kehoe. Mike and I have had a lot of conversations in the past. Mike is with the aging workforce of Newfoundland and Labrador. He's been a steadfast supporter and advocate of embracing and engaging and empowering older workers, and I'm looking forward to hear what Mike has to say here today too. And Corey Parsons. Welcome, Corey. Corey's the Deputy Director of Trades NL, so it's great to have the voice of labor here at the table and understanding what workers and organized labor is looking to get from the older workforce and what they can contribute. So I'm going to turn it over to Alan. Yeah. Alan, I'm going to turn it over to Alan now, and welcome, Alan. Thank you.
thank you. I always love being the guy between lunch, or be the last speaker and lunch. It's always a great spot to be in. But anyway, we'll take it from there. The last time I was in front of a group of people like this, people kind of looking at me, staring at me, not quite sure who I was at a political rally in Prince Edward Island, and I was running for office. And at the end, we had a question and answer, and lady stood up and she said, honest to God, it's a true story. She said to me, I would vote for the devil before I'd vote for you. And I said, ma'am, the devil's not running. Can I count on your vote? I didn't win, but there we go. So we're going to get into this here today, and we're going to talk a little bit about a changing workforce. So we're really going to explore how organizations and labor markets can better accommodate and support an aging population, adjusting our practices and ensure older workers and employers are, not only can they work in there, but they can thrive in there. And that's sort of what we want to achieve here today. But before we get started, I thought, in the normal Gale Force Winds technique, we try to get to know one another first. So on that note, Natasha, could I ask you to sort of introduce yourself and give us a little bit of a time in space when you thought that this is an important topic to be discussing, that older workforce?
Thank you so much, Alan. And it's really great to be here today. It's so good to see the turnout for this event. It's such an important topic, so kudos to Connections for Seniors for empowering us today. It's fabulous. A little bit about me, as Ron mentioned, I've had a few unique experiences in my career. So I did spend 10 years in the technology sector, 7 of those with Tech NL, which was Natty at the time, and Ron was my boss. I tend to follow Ron around. Some of the other experiences I've had, I've just recently finished up a role of serving as the Regional Partnerships Manager for BDC, which is a development bank that supports entrepreneurs across the country. And I'm also the chair of the board of directors for the Community Sector Council, which is an important organization when it comes to supporting everything to do with the community sector here in Newfoundland and Labrador and beyond. To see, the different impacts, everything from when we're looking at how older workers are treated in the workforce, how COVID and the pandemic accelerated some people leaving the workforce who were, not quite ready to retire, but it accelerated that process. The conversations around succession and older entrepreneurs who own companies and looking for someone to come in and buy that company. And then when we see when you look at the volunteer sector itself, we're talking about volunteers, the average volunteer is 60 years old. Right, so when we look at those people who are powering those community organizations, they are also people in the older workforce. So quickly, just a story that I think illustrates some of this is that with CSC, they do a lot of programs on the ground, and we can talk about that later as we get into it, but they had a situation where they had a volunteer organization that had a treasurer who was 92. And she wanted to learn how to use accounting software. And so they found someone to donate a laptop to this organization, and Community Sector Council came in with their Technos Tutors program, and they supported this woman to learn how to use the accounting software and the laptop. The organization didn't want a new treasurer. They wanted to upskill the one they had because she was fantastic. So I just think that's a good, it's great.
Corey, over to you.
Working?
Nope.
That's not working.
Better now?
There you go. It's on.
Working now?
Yeah.
Sorry. Corey Parsons, I'm with Trades and L. For those unaware, Trades and L's labour organisation representing 14 building construction trade unions here in the province. Been with them 8 years. 3 years ago, I guess, Alan asked to identify, I guess, a particular moment in my career that kind of brings me back to today's session. And 3 years ago, I joined the West White Road project in Argentia. And, for 25 years, I spent, probably like most people here, spent my career either in offices or boardrooms. And so it's a unique opportunity. Got out in the field, wear work boots and vests every day for the best part of 3 years. And I got to see firsthand the work of construction workers in our province and a unique dynamic of the young people coming in, people later in their careers, how they interacted, how they learn from each other. So I took that in the last few months. Now I'm back in the St. John's Corporate Office again. And since I've been back in September, I've been working with my colleague very, very closely around workforce development for skilled trades in the province.
Thank you, Corey. And Mike, over to you.
Thanks very much, Alan. Mike Keogh, I chair the aging workforce of Newfoundland and Labrador. We started out as the older workers of Newfoundland and Labrador, but nobody wants to be old anymore. so we rebranded. First of all, thanks to the organization Connections Ron. Great job. Great work for everybody for coming today. I've been active as an advocate most of my life in various causes. This one triggered in 2016 when co-workers of mine were experiencing job loss and lack of opportunity because of their age. They automatically had their benefit packages, medical, dental, vision, short, long-term disability cut off because of their age. They were refused opportunity for skills enhancement and training, even though the organization we were working for had 8,000 employees. So there were all kinds of things wrong, and it was really forcing older people out the door. So it motivated the road that's come here. When I see I don't usually sit up front like this, but I see a lot of faces around here that I feel like I should begin with the words, I apologize. Because as an advocate, our role is awareness creation. We're self-funding. So perhaps we have a tendency to say things and do things that are not suitable to some politicians. They may not find that way. This reminds me of, over the years, I've been fortunate to be able to participate in recovery work for some addiction recovery work as a volunteer. And a story of the penitentiary down there where there was a group of inmates at the penitentiary, and the speaker got up and began by saying, well, it's so good, so nice to see so many of you here today. Well, I'm an aging worker, and it's so nice to see so many of you here today. So, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So my story is I was 3 decades in the Navy, and when I retired, I don't like to use the word retired anymore now. So when I retired at 47, there was obviously more to do. So I went to work in a private industry, an engineering company out of the UK. And then I went to the University of Prince Edward Island, where I was director of the new engineering program over there. And it was while I was there that we had a big event at the university, and it was talking about an aging workforce and the like. And I went into the keynote speaker, and I sat in the back of the room, and it was as if the speaker was speaking directly to me. Unbelievable. A room full of people, and the speaker was talking to me. It was after that I came to understand what a legacy career was. And hence, Gale Force wins. So 2,700 interviews later, travel around the world, get to work with one of my best buddies over there, Jerry Carew. That to me was a legacy career. That speaker, you've got her book right on your table, was Lisa Taylor. So, is she here? Well, Lisa's gone out to interview VOCM. So, you are here. So, Lisa changed the trajectory of my career. I hope that the book does it for you as well. So, let's get right into it. Not me, her. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the changing demographics of the workforce. We've heard the statistics and the trends, but I want to sort of dive in a little bit deeper to that and talk a little bit about, do you think it's any one sector over the other? And I'm going to turn to you, Natasha, to go first on that, and then you guys can follow up after that.
Thanks, Alan. Well, again, I think it's interesting, Rob made that comment this morning about, all sectors are old except high tech where people are 23. There's a little bit of truth to that. But I also think the technology sector has the opportunity, because it's innovative and because folks in tech are willing to embrace the unknown, the new. I really think there's a lot of opportunity actually in tech for older workers as well. Thinking back again as well, looking at Techno Tutors, which is a community sector council program. They work with hundreds of seniors across this province to upskill them. Digital literacy is a barrier, and if we can remove that barrier, we're going to create more opportunity to keep those people in the workforce. For me, I find this really interesting because I'm at that midpoint in my career. I'm not a young worker, and I'm not like sort of exiting out. I'm right smack in the middle of that. And I often see younger workers who would benefit so much if they were able to leverage more the knowledge, the skill set, the organizational memory that older workers have in an organization. And it was really brought home for me during COVID because I watched people get hired into the organization that I was working for, younger workers who, for the first year and a half, they didn't meet anyone. So they spent a year and a half working on an organization where they never had an opportunity to actually physically, in person, learn from from people that had been there for a longer period of time than them. And so I think that COVID and the pandemic really illustrated the value that those more experienced workers give to these younger workers, because it enables the younger workers to be more integrated into an organization more quickly with better knowledge, better mentorship, better coaching. And so, when we look at what an older worker brings to the workforce, that loss is massive. And in order for us to be able to ensure the future of the organizations, we need to make sure that knowledge transfer is happening. So it's so important. I just think it's so important for us to make sure there's no gap here. And you see it in young people. We've all seen it in some of the younger workers that they're not sure because they haven't had that same level of experience. And so I think we need to do more to address that.
Corey, your thoughts?
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to speak specific to the construction sector, skilled trade workers. The value of the aging skilled trade worker in our industry is very, very important. And again, I relate back to the last 3 years at the Westway Roads project. And by going out there, I've seen a number of things that amaze me. One is the capacity as a province that we've developed in the province over the last 30 plus years. And I've often advocated around skilled trade workers, but it's much more than that. When you get into these here projects, everything from procurement, engineering, surveying, all kinds of trades there that in Newfoundland and Labrador today, we have the capacity to construct these here projects. And I hear from some of the older trade workers that will be job stewards that I deal with on a daily basis. And they talk back, some of them started their careers on Hibernia, for example, and went on to Hebron and Terranova and Long Harbour and stuff in between. But the capacity that we build as a province is phenomenal. And Hibernia, there's a large contingent of Norwegians came here to show us how to construct that project. To the next project, Hebron, there's a less contingent of other province people came here to show us how to do that scope of work. And today in the Westway Road project, for over the last probably year and a half to 2 years, there's one Australian here in Newfoundland and Labrador showing us. They don't need to show us how to build these projects anymore because we developed the capacity, and that leads to the older generational worker that went from project to project to project, learned the skills how to do it, brought it to the next project so they're able to do it better, more productive, more safe. When you hear that story, there's an important role for the aging skilled trade worker to retain them longer and for them to provide a mentorship role to the young tradespeople or apprentices that are coming into the workforce so that they learn the skill sets from those that learned before them.
And Mike, to remind you, really what we're looking at, is there any a sector that might stand out that is impacted the most? Over to you.
Well, thanks, Alan. We haven't focused on sectors as much. It's good to hear the comments this morning here on this. We focused on people. And what I mean by that is we focus on that aging workforce, of those people, let's say 50 above, who need or choose to remain in the workforce. Now, they may have been downsized, maybe COVID put them out, whatever the case might be. But trying to get back in if you're out, or trying to stay in if you're in this time of AI and technology and everything else, is a real challenge. So we focused on the ones that they're sort of isolated. They don't feel as though they have value anymore, yet they have had successful 20, 30 years of work. But they need to continue to work. They have kids to pay for, grandchildren, mortgages, whatever. Heads to pay for. So that's where we're focusing on. And so when we look at what's available to them to keep them in there, I listened to the wonderful information that Rob put out there this morning. But we've come across this information for 9 years. The community colleges, I'm hoping to hear from you today, because there are no training programs targeted to anybody other than the flavor of the month that government chooses. And this is not a negative reflection on immigration, but that's where all the money is spent, right? And the schools have to continue. So our focus is on, and then how do you get them to come out? Because all their lives they've been told, hey, you're supposed to be retired. Remember Freedom 55? Which didn't exist. Or maybe you've been unionized, but you have a pension, but you don't have enough to live on. So how do you keep them or bring them back in as workers that are needed now? It's a great inventory. You got to find out what they want, and you got to give it to them. Just the same as you encourage DEI or you encourage whatever else. This aging worker really needs a focus, really needs to be welcomed. So we're not in a sector, we're in a person. And it is so good to see this step move forward today by Connections for Seniors. Rob was the head of the House Center when the very first of these took place as a result of the seniors advocate of today, Suzanne Brake. And Rob was a tremendous boost in getting this up. 2018-19, Rob may remember that better than me, in phase one of getting this process. It is so good to be here today and see all of you decision makers here today, from government to the private sector. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Gale Force Winds, we keep our interviews nice and tight and short. And I remember a funny story. Alan Doyle came on our set one day and he took the microphone, he put it up his shirt and he plugged it on. And I always started, I say, introduce yourself. And I said, please go ahead and introduce yourself, like we did here today. Alan Doyle talked for an hour and a half. I didn't get another word in. And on that note, we're going to keep them tight. We got 10 topics to get through here today. So we're going to keep it nice and tight. Let's not pull an Alan Doyle. So let's talk a little bit about health and wellness support. Seniors are going to require different things in that particular area, flexibility in work and things, and actually things that we probably learned a little bit during COVID and things like that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we see that moving, and I'm going to turn to you, Mike, first, to talk a little bit about what types of health and wellness support can we provide seniors?
Oh, yeah, well, the big thing with seniors that are, and I'm just talking about the aging workforce, I'm not talking about a better bus to big goods or something like that. The big thing with seniors is an appreciation that they're valued, that they're important, and a recognition that you don't need to go over the corner and sit down. We're not finished with you. So I think if we get that, I think we'll have that, and that's what I can say on that.
Corey?
Thank you, Alan. We're very proud at Trades and Out. We offer a member family assistance program to all of our members working. That's an or so. And that's, drug and substance abuse rehabilitation, all that there as well. But as well, we offer, as part of our MFAP program, it's other wellness program, mental health assistance, not only for the member, for a family member as well, financial assistance, not fiscally financial assistance, but financial planning, legal assistance. So as a program, we offer that to our membership. It started with a substance rehabilitation program, but the inquiries and uptake, particularly from our older members, they wanted some of these auxiliary services available to them, particularly around financial planning, preparing for when they're ready to retire.
Fantastic. And over to you, Natasha, sorry.
Thanks. I would certainly agree with what Mike and Corey had to say. They were talking about things around financial planning for retirement and how you take care of yourself. I think those things are really important. I think just having these conversations is really important. I think just being here today is really important because I think a lot for many people in the population, unless they're impacted by it, they don't think about it. But making sure that us as a province understand the opportunity and the value, and to change that mindset so that we do value older workers and that seniors don't feel like they're in a corner. I know with the Community Sector Council and Collins team there, they've done a lot of work with the province. They've designated Newfoundland and Labrador a well-being province alongside of the provincial government, and that's really looking at things not just about work, but social, community, and because as we know, the well-being of an individual is not just your work, it's not just your social, it's not just, it's all of those things together that support a person. But ultimately, I think it's really important that we're having these discussions and that we're normalizing this as an important topic when we're looking at our workforce for the coming years.
Staying on the sort of this conversation and very closely tied to it would be sort of flexibility in work. And there's a concept that I'd like to sort of introduce and get your thoughts around, and that's around the idea of phased retirement, sort of working your way out over time at your own pace. So, Corey, I'm going to get you to tackle that one first, if you could.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. I'm glad you raised the question because I was wondering where I was going to get the opportunity to speak to this today, actually, in terms of the phase-out approach and the impact in particular our sector, again, doing muscular trades. Obviously, within the union, they have availability of health and welfare programs, but as well, and very important, is the pension plans. And that poses a problem in terms of keeping the aging skilled trades worker longer. If there's a way, taxation-wise or pension-wise, that we're able to bridge to so that you get to a comfortable age in life where you're able to draw down on your pension, but at the same time, the ability to go back to work, whether that's short-term or project-specific, and so that you're not impacted on your pension, and more so you're not fiscally impacted when tax time comes in spring of the year.
All right, Natasha, thoughts?
Again, Corey's certainly, I think, provided some good comments there. But absolutely, the idea of phasing people into retirement, the idea of part-time work, the idea of fractional work, the idea of remote work. And I think that's one of the few good things that came out of COVID was that employers are much more comfortable with remote work. Employers are much more confident that, work gets done if I'm not standing over you, right? This is a hire the right person problem, not where are you sitting hiring. And so I think there's that's very encouraging. But the idea of phased retirement, I think, would be so beautiful if we could see it more readily implemented into organizations across the board, and to see government promote it as well, so that you're retaining that intergenerational knowledge and that it's actually getting passed along. The other thing, is the more active seniors are, the healthier they are, mentally, physically, everything. So keeping people active keeps them active.
And Mike, thoughts?
Well, a person's mind was changed against her will as a person of the same opinion still. So if you try to force people to do something in the workforce, in the workplace, it's my experience, it doesn't work. But I think it's a recognition that if you've been working somewhere for 30 years, 35 years, you want to get away. You really do want to break. You may not want it for the rest of your life, but you just want out now. You do. So it would be wise for employers, for our structure, we're going to rethink society a bit, to say that's okay, we understand. you're burnt out. We all burn out. We've got to get away from it. But we want you to know that you're coming back. We want you back. And as Court says, sometimes you risk losing benefits like pensions or OAS or something like that if you take work. So government has a role there to be able to work to reduce that. But I think phased out working is great. It would need a paradigm change by the employers, and I hope they'll get it. I think they're going to be forced into it. I see the stats that Rob put up there so wisely this morning, that we really got to start rethinking this. Recognize that, if you've been there for 30 years, and somebody walks into the door and says, hey, why are you going to continue working? You'd be lucky if they land face first. And, but on the other hand, many want to continue to contribute. They want to continue to be a benefit to society. They don't want to be drawing down benefits from society. We're living older, better. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So the next one will be starting with you, Natasha, and to give you a little heads up on it. I'd like you to sort of walk us through sort of the a strategy to deal with the tariffs. I'm joking, of course. Look, I got you all wound up. No, this is, of course, is going to talk about training and upskilling, okay? But we all understand the need for life. I just want to get you on the edge. So this is all about a lifelong learning. We all understand that we just don't stop learning. And I think the older we get, the more we realize just how important that is. But of course, an aging workforce, we learn differently. We need different sort of tools and things to help us along the way. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that's a pretty exciting space to be in. And of course, I believe Kian is one of the key sponsors here where they're focused on that as well. So go ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting from a personal perspective. I decided to do my MBA part-time in my 40s, and while there wasn't an age, I would be considered like aging on the workforce, that was still a challenge, right? Because university is not built for people who have a full-time job. Now, I business faculty was fabulous. But to your point, and I think what's really important is online learning, assistive technologies. We're looking at, the more generative AI that is, providing support to people. But again, it goes back to digital literacy too, right? I think digital literacy is so important if we're going to be able to continue to upskill and do effectively and cost effectively. But if we don't have basic digital literacy skills, and that's why I think programs like Techno Tutors at CSC is so important, because it removes that barrier. Because half of it is you're afraid of things you don't know. If you're not comfortable using it, then it's going to be harder for you to dig in. But if you're comfortable sitting there with the laptop or whatever you're using from a technology perspective, you're going to be much more likely to dig in. Things around like part-time work, like maybe you can't work a 10-hour day or a 5-day work week. And so going back to what you're saying, Mike, I think industry and government have a role to play in setting better policies that are more supportive to that kind of approach. But ultimately, I really think the opportunity when we're looking at innovation and technology to create opportunities to upskill, but we've got to get that digital literacy machine running in order to open that door.
Mike, to you, because you had mentioned it initially in your open comments. Talk to us a little bit about that for us.
Well, very interesting remarks from, you referred to Techno Tutors a couple of times. I think it was around 2016 or 15, 10 of us from the place I work went in as a focus group a couple of times. At that point, I think it was called Community Services Council in those days before, but it was the precursor to what would eventually become Techno Tutors. And we were all looking for skills enhancement training. And a while ago, I got a notice that because of changing winds and things that different gale force winds in a different context, the Techno Tutor program would no longer be delivered through the community sector councils. Now that's a huge loss if that happens, if they're not a success. It's a huge program that was taken up by seniors. and a high skill set of training involved, very empathetic, very hands-on. But this is what we're talking about. We tried over the years to get into community sector or community colleges. I understand you gotta make money. You got bills to pay. But on this thing right here, when we most need it, I hope that we don't lose techno-tutors. That it doesn't fold into a shelf somewhere and it's picked up. Anyway, thanks very much.
Corey, your thoughts
Yeah,
on
I'll
that?
speak to lifelong learning, skilled trades. You're always learning. You start your career as an apprentice, as we all know, and you go through the block process until you become a journeyman person in Red Seal. I spoke earlier about the, I guess, the capacity of the province around skilled trades in the oil and gas industry in particular. And so, back around the life learning, how do we mentor? There's certainly a role for the aging worker in skilled trades to provide that ongoing mentorship to the young skilled trade worker that's starting their career, they're advancing their career, because move from the type of trades are, you could be doing one trade, but in a lot of different industries, and that's where our workers are moving a lot of times. They may have constructed some of the oil and gas projects I spoke about earlier, doing the mining sector, around the city here, building buildings like this here, probably on the roof today, doing the ICI sector around the province here in the city. So trades are highly mobile in terms of the skill set that you're using from project to project, and there's a real role today in Newfoundland and Labrador for the aging skilled trade worker to provide that mentorship services to, which is lifelong learning, to the younger trades worker that need to learn the skill. And I think we all would recognize, and all due respect to the colleges, we have 6 as well, and CNA and Key and Tech are all doing great entry-level training and block training and whatnot, but the real learning happens in the field, and I think most of us would agree to it. And who better could teach that to the young or the new skilled trade worker than those that's been constructing projects for 20, 25, 30 years.
Thank you, Corey. Mike, the next one's coming to you, and this is a big one, I would argue, and that's all about a workplace culture and inclusion, sort of merging the generations and acceptance of everybody in the workplace, and how important that is right now. So, Mike, I'll get you to kick that one off.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. To many older workers, today's workplace is as being like a moose caught in the headlights of a car. You know, what you would compliment somebody on their hair, on their clothing, maybe years before, male or female, whatever the case might be, it's no longer acceptable. So it's a bit of a minefield at times, and it really needs training. The workers I've been very fortunate to be part of, they've been great mentors. The older workers, they don't want to go upstairs, they want to see the younger person go upstairs, right? They show up. They do the job. They're team players. They share their donuts, you know? So older workers are really, for the most part, I mean, sometimes you get contrary SOBs and everywhere in life, but
That's not an age thing.
the aging workforce, intergenerational is good, but they can use enhancement. And I think we'd be naive to say that what I take as commonplace in the 60s and 70s, 80s, yeah, and doing the math, some of you are doing the math, back in the day, are no longer acceptable. It just doesn't work anymore. And I think it's probably good for the employer and the training institutes to keep that in mind when you're working with older workers.
And Natasha, to you on that culture and inclusion.
Yeah, well, I think what Mike says here is absolutely 100% bang on. Older workers do have so much to offer, and in 99% of the cases, except for the crotchety people, they do want to share that knowledge and transfer it. They don't want to, for them, they see value in supporting younger workers. And going back to my comments earlier about younger people in the workforce, or like people that I saw joining my organization over the last couple of years where it was primarily remote, like I really feel for them, because they don't have that same connection to the older mentors and the older people that are part of those organizations. Like I know for me, when I go into an organization, I always seek out those people who have been there longer, have that longer tenure, because they're the ones that hold all the knowledge, right? So encouraging that cross-pollination within organizations, or company culture, company policy, creating runway and space, setting up sessions, roundtable groups for employees internally, that kind of thing. And again, I think government, not-for-profit organizations, industry, labor, everyone has a role to play in that to create the culture where we expect that. That's the norm. It's not the exception.
Corey, to you?
Yeah, I think the culture of the workplace is very important, particularly around retainment of workers. There's many things that the employers could do. Engagement with workers, it's obviously a very important one. You feel like you're part of the workplace, feel comfortable around your co-workers, feel that you're contributing to your employer. It's more likely that you're going to want to work long and stay with that employer. And again, back in the trades perspective, proud of the sisterhood and brotherhood movement that we have there, and again, the culture of the workplace. They started their day doing a toolbox talk, maybe a little bit unique compared to other occupations, but it starts that camaraderie between workers. You're talking to each other, then you have the breaks, or using lunchrooms together. And today kind of repeats like that. Here's sort of the culture of the construction site, starting with the toolbox talk, engaging workers where the employer comes in and stuff, makes it inclusive, people wants to be involved, employers listening, feedback from the workers, and it just builds that this is sisterhood, brotherhood that all of us want to be to go to work every day.
Corey, keep the mic up there because yours is the next one, and it's going to be about... You're not bad, though. You're pretty close. Anyway, adapting technology to the older workforce. And I'm talking about ergonomics and things that make it easier for an older worker to stay in the workforce. And I think that's pretty pertinent to you. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Skilled trades is a hard, harsh career, as most people know. There's certain technologies that you can bring in to assist, but it's very labor intensive. Something like the tool belts, advancements in tool belts and harnesses and lifts and stuff like that. They're certainly advanced over the years, but from a trades perspective, it's very labor intensive and it's about doing the job safely. It's not always been quicker, it's about doing safely so that the job gets done, but the workers are safe and able to return home to their family needing and able to return back to the job site the next day. And I guess there are advances to be made in the construction sector. My colleague Brandes here could speak to it maybe, but the pretty labor intensive, and I go back to the Westwood Road project again, and I'm sure people would have seen how tall that structure is. I think it's nearly 3 times in context, 3 times the height of Federation Building, and to put it in context of things not advancing happening is there's over 430 wheelbarrows of concrete went in that structure. So when you drive around the city, you can see the pump trucks putting stuff in the basements and stuff. And then you go to a big industrial site like that, there you say, almost 500,000 wheelbarrows physically handled and dumped to construct that structure. So it's I know it doesn't answer your question, but I will say it's a physically demanding occupation in the trade and construction sector.
So in the interest of time, I'm going to roll on to the other topics as opposed to getting your input on that, because I'm sure you got some things to talk about on other things. So Natasha, this one's coming to you, and it's really around succession planning and knowledge transfer, like such a cool topic to understand that we can pass knowledge across generations to ensure the success of our economy and the like. Talk to me a little bit about that, Natasha.
So for me, that's one that really sticks out and is relevant in all aspects of our economy, our workforce, whether we're talking about, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs. I spent most of my career working with entrepreneurs. And the number of entrepreneurs in Atlantic Canada, and particularly Newfoundland and Labrador, who are poised and would like to sell their business. It's very difficult to find supports for an orderly transition. Supporting a younger person to buy that business. we need to create a better system. I don't have the answers. I'm not saying I have the answer to that problem, but it's something that we have consistently seen over the last 15 years. There's often questions that will come up, and like I know Roseanne from the CBC, Newfoundland and Labrador is here. They see it all the time too, where entrepreneurs are like, I would really like to find someone to take over my business. Where do I start with that? How do I find someone to evaluate my business? How do I advertise to find someone to buy my business? Like there's 100 things that we need to do just on that piece alone. Then when we're looking at in the workforce, when we're talking about in organizations of, you have these older people, older workers who have all the knowledge. They've seen it all. There's, my favorite is when a younger person will say, well, why are we doing it this way? And an older person will pipe in, because we tried that 20 years ago, and here's all the reasons why we don't do it that way, right? So I think it's having these conversations is so important. Just us being here today and talking about this and creating more awareness, and we need to do more of it. And this is why I'm excited, because I think that Connections for Seniors and all the stakeholders here are going to move this forward. This is not the end of this conversation, and it's really important that we keep talking about it and we keep bringing the solutions and the options and the ideas to the table.
And Mike, the next one is to you, and that's around legal and policy considerations. Where's the work to be done there?
Gosh, that's a big.
And understanding you have 45 seconds.
Yeah, it's it's a good question. And it's not something that, we really know. I know when I mentioned earlier, when we started this out, we had a lot of issues surrounding, the ageism that's on the go, things like that. So I guess an organization or an employer would do well to have a workforce that has access to advice, to the advice of its legal people, collaboratively. Because if we had had it in our day, we wouldn't have resulted in a filing with human rights people. So I'd encourage collaboration between the employer and the employee on something like legal issues.
Thank you. The next one I want to talk a little bit about, and we talked about it in the earlier conversations, is about global perspectives and what other people are doing and how we see ourselves moving in that direction. So maybe if I could, 15, 20 seconds from each of you around your vision for global perspectives. We'll start with you, Natasha.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the but one of the great advantages we have is that we have such a strong community in Newfoundland and Labrador. There's no anonymity here. We all know each other, we're all related to each other, right? So there's always an opportunity for us to come together and create this faster, better, and with better connections. Not to play on the title, but yeah.
100%.
We already have that opportunity because we live in a province where we're already better connected than most people are.
I agree. Corey?
I speak to global in the context of Newfoundland and Labrador. Similar to what Natasha is saying is that I think most people even in this room, go from room to room every other week. But the collaboration within the province that I'm seeing today is better than I've ever seen it before. I see my colleagues from RPGS here, Energy NL, NOIA, spoke around the Construction Association earlier, and the engagements that we're having on an ongoing basis, recognizing the labor market and the importance of planning for it. It's good to see globally in Newfoundland and Labrador that we're trying to do it collectively rather than back in our own shops doing it individually.
He's a little bit like Alan Doyle. Anyway, and to you, Mike.
Well, I think it's important that we have knowledge of the big picture. I know it's like to work in the engine rooms and in the boardrooms in Newfoundland and Labrador and Ottawa in the United States, Europe, Asia, places like that. So it was really important to see what was going on at that, but it's equally as important. For example, we hosted a couple of people over from India who were IT guys, and we took them out, and they were sent over because they were really taking a software program we managed and moving it to India. So they came over here and they're learning, well, if you want to see shock, culture shock, in February, standing out at Cape Spear with a couple of fellows from India, it was never below 30 degrees. So it's important really to understand where you're coming from that. And if the employer can train, say, hey, you know what? Our products, our interactions here's where we go. Even if it's video, try and give your workers an understanding of what they're dealing with. I think that'll have to.
The last question I have for you, and it really is a big one, and that is, where do you see the opportunity? So in a few sentences from each of you, where do you see the opportunity here in an older workforce in Newfoundland and Labrador? And Mike, I'll start with you.
Well, it really, in a lot of ways, depends on what happens here. You may recall I mentioned 2016, and then Rob in 2018, that he helped coordinate here, and many meetings since then, many of you in different departments, agencies, schools. We are now on the threshold of implementing skills enhancement, training, but a recognition of the value of retaining skill sets of aging workers. And so the opportunities will be what you do with this, because I recognize most of you, you're all decision makers. I apologize for the politicians that may be here, but all the rest of you are decision makers. So where you go with this, and thank you, Mike, thank you, Ron, thank you, Connections for Seniors. Where you go with this is going to have a lot to say on how successful this is.
We have a new Alan Doyle in the crowd. Over to you, Corey.
I go through quickly. Two quick things I would say. I mentioned earlier, I think in my opening, Randy, some type of financial relief to keep workers working longer, whether it's with pensions I spoke to or tax relief this time of year. And second opportunity for older or aging workers is the mentorship opportunities that exist. If we want to continue to grow our workforce for the future, I think there's real synergies. We take a concerted effort to blend together the old worker with the new workers coming into the trade so that we have that availability workforce for the future.
And Natasha, the opportunity?
Well, I'm hoping that people are gonna walk away from this today feeling more responsibility and ownership to keep this momentum going. This is what we need to do. We need to keep this momentum going. We're talking about, policies that are more flexible around retirement benefits and around, pension plans, those kind of things. But like as Mike said, I put it back to the people in this room today. It's on all of us to keep this going. This should not be the end of the conversation when the conference ends today.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our panel. And thank you very much.
That was a great, thank you guys.